Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of infertility, miscarriage, stillbirth, pregnancy loss, grief, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, child-free life after infertility, surrogacy, medical trauma, emotional trauma, discussion of death, family, and social pressures. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have Carrie Hauskins with me from California. Carrie is a freelance writer based in Northern California. Her expertise is writing about infertility and the many tangents that radiate from that experience. Her trademark is vulnerable and authentic writing. After 8 years of trying to conceive, multiple miscarriages, working with surrogates, and delivering her stillborn daughter, she embodies all things grief and fertility based. And I am so excited for this conversation for so many reasons. Welcome, Carrie. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story.
Oh, thank you. I think sharing stories is so empowering and it just makes so many people not feel alone. So
Agreed. Sharing stories changes lives. It saves lives. And I think we all have a story to share too.
yes, absolutely. So I started following you on Instagram. I don't even know. I think fairly recently, and have just seen a lot of your posts and they've really resonated with me. So I know a teeny tiny bit of your story, I think, but I don't know a lot. So I feel like I'm going to learn a lot during this conversation too. So why don't you go ahead and start from the beginning, wherever you would like, and share your story.
Sure. So my husband and I got married in 2014 and we started trying for a baby right away. And I like to say it was fun until it wasn't, because years turned into more years of us not getting pregnant naturally and watching most of our friends around us start the life that we wanted. And around like year 5, we found out that we were great candidates for IVF. We started out knowing that my husband has male factor infertility.
Okay.
So we jumped right into it. I got pregnant. I had a miscarriage right away. And then we did not stop by any means. In the next cycle, we did our next round. And that is when I got pregnant and carried my daughter for 8 months. And I had a rare liver disease that only comes with pregnancy. It's called cholestasis of pregnancy. And it's basically like the first sign is you're really itchy. And in most cases, like it's like there's medication, everything's fine. But I had a very severe case. And within a week of finding out I had this, she died. And I ended up delivering her stillborn 2 days later. And that is actually 5 years ago this month. Just about a couple days ago was we call it Clementine's Day because we named her Clementine. and we celebrate. Like we really try to like have it something that we love.
Hmm.
So after I delivered her stillborn, I was told I probably shouldn't be pregnant again because cholestasis of pregnancy comes back with anybody, but mine was so severe that they're like, you probably shouldn't do that.
So it's
So
only a thing that happens during pregnancy then?
during pregnancy, yes, your liver basically isn't like digesting the bile the way it should. And
Interesting.
I have had liver issues, but which they think is why it was so severe, but it also people can have it without having liver issues as well. Uh,
Okay. Weird.
yeah, I'd never even heard of it. I'd never even heard of it.
I never have either. And I've been in the infertility world for 8 years myself. And I'm like, I've never heard of that before.
And most people, like I said, like they have a healthy babies and things like that, but we were a very severe case. So the
Oh,
doctor told us
sorry.
not to get pregnant again, and we still had two frozen embryos, and they were like A+ embryos, and so we put the search out for surrogate, and we had multiple wonderful people step up in our life. We ended up working with one of my best friends from childhood who I hadn't spoken to in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
It was really sweet, and she got pregnant twice, but had two miscarriages.
Oh.
And then when that happened, we were like approaching 8.5 years. And it was like I was really tired of being so tired and sad. And we had put up all these boundaries of we weren't going to do IVF, we weren't going to work with a surrogate. And then we kept crossing that boundary. And we had talked about adoption and we looked into it and it didn't feel right for us.
Mm,
And I remember telling my husband, I think I'm done.
mm.
And he was like, are you sure? We've always said we think we weren't going to do it. And then we did it. And I was like, I think this is it for me. And we went to therapy and kind of talked it out. And we both agreed that we were going to fully embrace our child-free after infertility life, which is exactly what we're doing.
And I love that because that is what drew me to your account, actually, because I'm at that stage of trying to figure out, after so many years of IVF, and things, figuring out the childless, not by choice
Mhm,
life.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so seeing your account has brought me a lot of joy and hope, and that there's going to be light on the other end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Um,
And no matter like what happens, there's happiness in that. And I think that I never saw that. Like there was only a
Mhm.
few accounts that I had seen, but like not having children felt like a nightmare. That was like the
Yeah.
worst thing that could happen to me. And now I'm the happiest I've ever been, which was a surprise.
How long did it take you to get to that point, do you think? After
Great
this thing?
question. I
Mhm.
still have rough days. I want to be very clear. I
Okay.
still like see a therapist and not as much as I used to, but I still have hard times. But
Yeah.
it was pretty quickly after I felt relieved, honestly, that I didn't have to keep trying. And I did a lot of work, like intentional, okay, I'm going to do the things that make me happy that I didn't really have the space to do before. I always described it as I felt like once we decided to stop trying, I felt like I had more room in my brain. I was devoting so much of my life to becoming a mother that like I
Hmm.
completely lost myself. I lost relationships. I'd lost things that I'd love. I forgot who I was without motherhood. And
Mm.
so I really dove into the things that made me feel good. And I quit my job. I was a teacher for 10 years. And I went back to work the same year after I delivered Clementine stillborn. And then in the middle of the next year, my mom was re-diagnosed with cancer. And immediately I was like, I don't want to be here. I
Oh,
thought maybe I did because being a teacher was such an identity of myself.
sure.
But I was like, this isn't making me happy. And life is too short. I just want to be with my mom. And so I just quit in the middle of the year. And that changed a lot of things to show myself that I can do these big changes and still
Yeah.
have a good life. And so I think that I started to, like I said, like just really lean into the things that felt good, almost forced myself into it because it was like,
Oh.
I don't want to be sad because I was sad for almost a decade, like really sad.
And I think that's something that a lot of people not going through infertility don't understand because
Yes.
I'm in this stage where I'm facing like, I feel, and maybe this is me just putting this on myself, but I feel like because we've thought about the adoption route, we haven't ruled it out yet, but
Mhm, mhm,
we're not like, yes, let's go do that right now.
mhm,
I don't want to do donors. I don't want to do
mhm.
surrogates, things like that. And so I'm at this stage where I feel like if I don't do those things, then people think I don't want it bad enough. Or
Absolutely. Because you could keep going forever. That's a possibility.
but it's been such a focus for similar to you, like for 10 years, and even going back to before I started fertility treatments, just the trying every month
Yes.
and focusing on your cycle. And it became for me so much of my identity in those years of I'm going to be a mom and I'm going to do everything in my power to do it. And then you just get so burnt out on that and the universe constantly telling you that it's not happening.
I'm a planner, so I'd be like, oh, like I can't do that in 3 months because I'm going to be pregnant, or
Yeah.
this isn't going to be an option for me because we'll have a newborn by then. And I stopped living my life. And
Mm-hmm.
it really just took over. And I thought like I thought my life would start once I became a mother. I think that's where like it
Mm.
was wrapped up for me. And then I was like, oh, I'm missing out on like things
Yeah.
that felt important.
Yeah. So what kind of things did you start getting into?
My husband and I love to travel. And we did the whole like, oh, you'll relax on vacation.
Oh
And
yeah.
shocker, we didn't get pregnant on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my husband and I like to travel. One of the big things that like in the middle of our infertility process was we bought a school bus and we converted it into an RV.
I love that. We've talked about trying to do some type of camper van or something like that.
Yes, it's
Mm-hmm.
so fun. It's so fun. And I needed a project to where I felt like I could control it and get a win because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what a win was feeling like anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
that became a new identity for us because I was very open about us trying to become parents. So I feel like people were always like, have you tried this or have you talked to this person? And which is exhausting because when you do it all and it still doesn't work, you're like, I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was like, instead of the identity of the couple trying to conceive, we became the couple that has the school bus. And that was really fun for me to be like, oh,
I love that.
I heard about your school bus. And it was like, it's so fun. So that's been a big part of who we are and what we do. And we built it with the idea of taking our dogs traveling, which we've done. And then when I quit teaching, I went back to teaching just art, which was really fun. And so I've
Oh.
really leaned into a lot of art classes and just being really creative in a way
Mm-hmm.
that has been really helpful in processing a lot of my grief. Um,
Yeah.
like I have an Etsy shop and I'm going to start teaching art again next year to in a studio, not like a school situation. But that's really fed me in a way that I've always been creative, but I leaned into it when I needed something to feel good.
Okay. I
Yeah.
love that. Hi, everyone. It's Tawny from Radiant Resilience. I have some exciting news. I've been nominated for an award in the Women in Podcasting Awards under the category of Inspiration and Motivation. I'm so honored and I love your support. If you found any inspiration or motivation from this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you took a moment to go online and vote for Radiant Resilience. Please visit the link in the show notes. Your vote means the world to me, and it helps us reach even more people who might need to hear these stories. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. I truly appreciate you. Oh man, this journey is just so full of so many twists and turns, and it's exhausting. And I love, like when you were talking about you just knew you were done. You have to recognize that too, because my husband and I have talked about how this can become an addiction.
A
Like,
1000% yes.
because that tiny glimmer of hope of the possibility that it will work at some point just keeps you wrapped up in it.
Yes. And I didn't know what my life was going to be like without it. Like I said, I thought it was like this worst nightmare possibility. And I remember having a therapist. So I got a therapist that specialized in infertility, which I didn't even know that existed until she showed up at a local support group. And I was like, oh, can I have your card?
Yeah.
And I remember her asking me once, do you feel like you'll do anything to get a kid? And at that point I said yes. And she said, then you will have one. You will have a kid, which made me like get excited. But then
Yeah.
a few years later, it was like, I don't think I want to continue doing anything. And she's okay, then let's explore what that looks like. And that felt really scary, but it is true. We could still be trying. That could still be happening. And I just was so tired. I just wanted to have, I just wanted to be happy. I didn't, and then when I started tapping into the things that made me happy, that happiness made me feel scared because I hadn't felt good in a while. It was like, oh, I can do something and then have it work out. I didn't know what that felt like anymore. And it felt really like unstable, which to me, I was like,
Interesting.
woo, I need therapy because I want to be able to like still enjoy life and know that
Yeah.
things do work out.
Yeah. How many times did you do IVF?
So I did two transfers. We did one egg retrieval and we got 5 or 6 eggs. And then I did two transfers and our surrogate did two transfers as well.
Okay. But prior to that, you said you were trying for 5 years.
We tried naturally for 5 years.
It's
Yes.
a long time to try for 5 years. I gave up after like a year and a
Super.
half.
No, I know super long time. But and it's funny because like we started the school bus around like that 4 year mark. And
Okay.
I felt like it gave me the confidence to admit there was a problem because I wouldn't admit there was a
Mm.
problem. Like I was like, it's gonna
Oh.
work. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. Like I'm doing acupuncture, I'm meditating, I'm going to yoga, I'm taking the herbs. So I was like living in like this loop of this is gonna work out because I didn't know anybody who had gone to a fertility clinic. I did, they just weren't saying it.
Mm.
And so it felt like a failure even to do that. And then it was like when we like built the bus, we were on our first trip across country and I was like, I think I'm ready to go to a doctor. And my husband was
Mm.
like, okay.
Yeah. That's so you did IVF and then okay, so you had your stillborn from your
Mhm.
IVF. What was that like?
It was terrible,
Yeah.
but also it really shifted my perspective on life, like grief. I'm a grief writer now. It's like what I mainly write about. And it just, I don't know, like I never had really had a capital G grief thing in my life before. Like I had had people that had died, like grandparents or something, but like it was their time and it didn't seem out of ordinary, like out of order in the world. And when Clementine died, it felt like, oh wow, like bad things can happen. And for a while after that, I was in the loop of, oh, I was so aware of bad things happening. I became very anxious.
Mm.
Like even to this day, like when my husband calls me in the middle of the day, he has to start with I'm okay because I'm like, okay, like this feels like a little still nervous. And like, we joke
Yeah.
about it now, but like in the beginning it was like I can't I knew bad things were happening and it was very scary.
Mm.
And it was also like one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. Like I was so afraid of what was about to happen because I went into the hospital on a Wednesday and they had told us that her heart had stopped. And then on Friday morning, I delivered her. And the whole time they like kept asking me, like, do you want to hold your daughter? Do you want to take pictures? And I couldn't answer it. I was like, I don't know.
Great.
I don't know what I'm going to feel like. And I was so afraid to see her.
Mm.
And then when we delivered her, she was the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen in my life. I remember she came out and they were like, she's tall and I'm really tall. And I was like me. And she
Oh,
looked like my husband. And we held her and we took pictures. And it was like such a soft, beautiful thing that I was so afraid of.
yeah.
And I'm really glad that like we were pushed to do that. Or the nurses that we worked with they were amazing. But I'd known people that had that happen before, but in my eyes, I was like, that won't happen to me. Like
Mm,
even
sure.
when the day that I was like feeling sick, like I didn't feel good that day, I was like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I remember being like, we're not going down that scary loop. And then it was a really scary space, but also it has brought so much beauty and love into my life that I was unexpected. I didn't expect just like that greatness that like
Mhm.
cracked me open to. And I can't help but see that in so many other ways of my life that has really propelled me forward to live how I want my life to be.
Oh, what an experience. I love the
Yeah.
way that you're looking at it now. Obviously, it was horrific and awful and very difficult, but to look at back on it with a positive light, if you can, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I think about like how I didn't choose that clearly, but also I want to be able to live with it, like not against it.
Yeah.
I've seen like there's some older women in my life that have shared, they're like in their 70s and 80s, and they're like, I had a stillbirth too, but I was never allowed to talk about it. I was never allowed to see the baby. I was never allowed to name the baby.
Oh,
And it's, oh wow, things are different. Cause she was like, I or this one particular woman I'm thinking of, she was like, no one would ever want to hear my story. And I was like, oh, I don't even think about like people not wanting to hear it. I just have to say it. And she was like, but there was not a platform or a space for me to share it
Yeah.
60 years ago. And I was like, yeah, that is different.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And like you can't, for me, I don't know how else to process it. And we all process in our own ways, but for me, it's sharing it.
I've always been a very open book about mine. I've only more recently become a little bit more closed off just because I'm trying to figure out my own healing and
Right.
I don't want to deal with the comments and the advice
Yeah.
and
Oh,
the
you should try
judgment.
this.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel because I'm not pursuing anything right now. And then
Hmm.
people are like, why don't you try this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you know? And then I feel like I'm not doing everything I possibly can to make this
Right.
happen. And I don't want it bad enough, which at the same time, I'm looking back on my story. I busted my ass. I've done 5 egg retrievals and I had
Oh,
8 failed embryo transfers.
oh, wow. Yeah. That
Yeah.
is
So,
not sitting on your butt by any means.
yeah. But I started out being very open about it and sharing it because I wanted to help with the stigma. And then for me,
Mhm.
because I'm a very open book about my emotions and stuff, that was helping me process as well. So I totally understand that. And then I just, towards the end, I'm like, I'm so tired of telling everybody bad news. That's really what I
Yes.
got
Yes.
to the
That is
point of.
very relatable. Yes.
Mhm.
Like people always want to know like what your next steps are. What's next? And I don't know what's next.
Yeah. And I'm a hairdresser and I had a client one day who knew my story and had been with me for many years. And she leaned over to the owner of my salon and was like, is Tawny pregnant yet? And then the owner told me later, and I was like,
Oh boy.
I will tell you if and
Exactly.
when
Yes.
that
Yes.
happens.
Yes. Yes.
That is not for
Yes.
someone else to tell you about. Even if I was in that moment, you think I would have been happy that the owner of the salon told you that?
Right.
Like,
It's my story. It's my story to share. Like
yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting take. But I feel like sometimes when you are open like that, people think that they have all this access to you in a
Yes.
way. Like, oh, you've been vulnerable before, so I know you'll be vulnerable again. And it's if I feel like it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I just had in my head from the beginning that it was all just going to work, right? Like at
same.
some,
Of course this is gonna work. Yes.
because I would
The
say,
science is here. People are doing it.
do you know the statistics of, I've been curious about this. I should look it up, but I've been curious about the statistics of the people who go through IVF all the way to whether it's surrogacy or whatever using IVF who do not have success.
I do not know the statistic, but I know that there's this lady, Katie Seppi from the Childless Collective. She talks
Oh,
about the
I follow
numbers
her
a
too.
lot. Yeah, she's mentioned the numbers. I can't remember what they are. But also, I remember like when we showed up to our first IVF appointment, my husband is like a physics major, he's a math nerd. He showed up with a spreadsheet and was like, I want to talk about what our chances are. And
Mm,
they were like, oh, that's not really how it works. Like each chance is its own chart.
yeah.
And he was like, I'm not super comfortable with that.
He wants the math, the
Yes,
numbers, all the
yes.
things. Yeah, that's funny.
And then I remember when we did get pregnant, it was like, well, of course this is gonna work. This is what
Mhm.
like we did all the stuff to get to this point. And then it didn't work out. And it was like, oh, okay, so there are things in life where you can put your whole heart and a decade of money worth into,
Yeah.
and it still not work out the way that you
Yeah.
want it.
Yeah.
Was just like it broke my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel about the mindset part of it? Because I'm more of a we type
Mhm.
person.
Same.
And so a lot of people are like, the positive mindset is what's going to get you there and everything. And like you were saying, you were convinced for 5 years that you were
Yeah.
just going to get pregnant naturally, and you
Mhm.
wholeheartedly believed that. And even
1000%, yes.
me, going into my very first round of IVF, I wholeheartedly believed that was going to solve my
Yep.
problems and I was going to get pregnant. So I would love your take on that because I have mixed feelings about it
Same.
now.
Same. So I feel like I was very much in the like positive, this is gonna work. I didn't even think about what it would be like without this working because this was going to work. And then the toxic positivity really set in, and I felt like
Um,
I wasn't able to feel what I was really feeling. Like I kept it in, and
mhm.
I didn't want to acknowledge that I was scared that it wasn't going to work. And people are like, "Oh, don't say that." But it's what I'm feeling.
And how can you not?
How
do
could I not?
not feel that way.
And then when I didn't say that because I really tried to hide it, I turned to drugs and alcohol and it did not
Oh.
go well. And there came a point in my life where I would have my first sip of alcohol and I would just burst into tears.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, like I remember being with my brother once, who's one of my favorite humans, and we always have a fun time together. And we had our first drink and he was like, whoa, what's happening? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I remember he was like, I think like something's going on. This isn't normal. And I needed somebody to pull me out of it
Yeah.
that knew me well enough to be like, this is not like something's not coming through. And then it was like, oh, I'm really scared. I'm really sad. I don't know if this is going to work or not. And I don't see any representation of that anywhere. So who's survived this? To my knowledge,
Yeah.
everybody had children that wanted children or they adopted and they're like, this is fixing everything.
Hmm.
And that's not the reality of it. So I feel like I really tried to hide it. And have always been tried to be very open. But once that like the jealousy came out and like feeling bad about like my manifestation classes not working,
Yeah.
was okay. I don't have to like, I don't know. I had to give myself permission of it's okay. You can feel what you want to feel. And I
Hmm.
had to teach myself how to be like, it's okay to have this so-called bad emotion.
Yeah.
And like people go through this. They're just not often telling you that they're feeling that way.
Yeah. I did a vision boarding workshop. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, which I love doing. I love doing
Yeah,
vision
I have a
boards.
vision board right here.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have my two are on my wall over
Yes.
here, which I won't show you because this side of the room is a mess, but it was actually very triggering for me because
Yep.
I had
Yes.
already done multiple rounds of IVF and I'm like, okay, it has been a goal of mine, maybe not in a vision board specific sense, but it's been a goal of mine to get pregnant and have a family. And so then when I was going through this vision boarding workshop and we're talking about your goals and what you want to do for the next year and all these things, I was like, I've literally thought about this every year for the past however
Yep.
many years, and it has not happened. So, do I want to put this on here or
Right.
do I not?
No, I've been in that for sure, that situation. I think the last few I've done, I'm like, I'm gonna focus on like colors and textures, not necessarily like these big ideas because it's heartbreaking when you're like, I have the
Yeah.
same fucking vision board
Yeah.
over and I burned a lot of them when we stopped because I was like,
Oh.
I can't hold on to this. Like, I have enough journals written about it. Like, the visuals are a lot. I don't, so I got really into meditation during my fertility journey. Like, I became a certified meditation teacher.
Oh,
And
nice.
now I have a hard time with it because it was my
Oh.
go-to for so long that, like, I have to prepare myself because it's just like my body is like instantly, oh, we did this for a really long time when we were really sad and we're not really sad
Mm.
anymore. So it doesn't really feel as good. And like the past few, I'd say maybe a year or so, I've tapped into it, but nothing like I was used to because it was super triggering. Like it was like,
Yeah.
that was just like the thing that I went to, like emergency meditations. I had that on my app because I was having panic attacks like crazy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I even had my most recent fertility doctor asked me if I did vision boards, and I was like, yeah. And he goes, do you have pictures of babies on it? And
Uh-huh.
honestly, I had only done pictures, pregnancy pictures, I had done
Yes.
nursery
The baby was almost
pictures,
like an afterthought, I feel like, because you're like, I just got to
right?
get to the pregnant part. We can talk about the rest after.
Which is never a step I got to. So I'm
Right.
like, yeah, I felt, and I can look at them now. I have the positive pregnancy test. I have the little Z
Yep.
announcement
Announcements.
thing.
Yes.
And I was like, no, I've never done a baby picture on it. And also that kind of feels weird, like putting other people's baby pictures on.
Notes. Yes.
Like even the like pregnant lady pictures are not their face. But I don't know. It's just so interesting because I've also recently had somebody tell me to energetic gal that I'm working with who I love, but mentioned like your therapist said about if you want this so badly, like you need to stop thinking about the how it's going to happen and it will just
Mhm,
happen. But
mhm.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I didn't know how to turn that off. And I
Mm,
feel like because we were so like, I don't know, like I'm a planner. Okay, what are the steps that are going to get me to this goal? Because I love making things work out. And for most of my life, things were working out. So it
yeah.
felt, okay, this is just the path of my life. And I don't know, it was a slippery slope. It was a slippery slope.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like, I don't know, I personally have to let go of that hope. Which sounds really bad, but if I hold on to any small inkling of that hope of it happening, I'm never going to be able to shut it off. I'm
Yeah.
never going to be able to not pay attention to my period every month. I'm never going
Right.
to be able to be like, and then even actually just recently, I had a new client and we ended up talking about it. And it was actually interesting. I found out she has a podcast talking about some of this stuff too.
Oh.
Not fertility specific because she does have kids, but she had to do some fertility treatments and
Hmm.
things. So she even suggested, or she was telling me her story about how her husband had a varicocele and had it fixed and blah, blah, blah. And then they got pregnant. And so then my brain, still, because I have not figured out how to shut it off yet, is like, maybe my husband could go to your urologist and
Because we're always looking for the answers of
and
like, well, what
I
do we
know
do?
in my heart of heart, my soul of souls, that I'm done with fertility treatments. I'm done with
Mhm.
IVF. And I know that, but there is still a part of me that every once in a while goes back to that thought of maybe we could try that, or maybe I could do that surgery and then we could try naturally and
Uh-huh.
all of those things. Have you been able to shut that off or?
It has definitely lessened over the years. I think because we're like 4 years out from stopping trying. In the beginning, there was definitely like, okay, maybe it'll just happen, even
Yeah.
though,
Yeah, the
even though my
whole,
doctor
oh,
was
if you
like,
stop thinking about it and you
yes,
quit pursuing it, it's just going to happen.
yes, even though my doctor was like, remember, you should not be pregnant. And I
Mm,
didn't want to go on birth control because that was a very, like when I was on birth control, it was just not chill for me. So I
yeah,
was like, I don't think we're just gonna, if it happens, like there's medication. And the doctor was like, all right, this is your choice. And I do not feel that way anymore.
yeah,
But I think like it was like, it was just like the paths of my brain of this is the things that we've been doing. So it was hard. It was definitely hard to shut it off. But I think over the years, like it's not something I think about that much anymore.
yeah.
It's definitely Mother's Day comes up, and I have
Mm,
nieces that would be my daughter's age. So like sometimes
mm,
milestones are hard, but it's more, I think I've just been leaning more into the, okay, what am I gonna do instead of having children? Like
yeah.
that's
Which
the
is
a new
actually a terrifying prospect.
totes.
Like, I feel like it's a type of identity crisis for sure.
Oh my goodness, yes. Little Carrie pictured me as a mother. Like this was
Yes.
never
And
that.
that was going to be your life, right?
Yes.
Which with kids is a very different life than without kids.
Yes.
And yeah, that's
Like
it.
I've talked about this in therapy that like the hardest part I feel was me letting go of the life that I wanted, letting go
Yes.
that, okay, like this room we redid for our nursery, and
Mm,
I didn't go and come into this room for like, I did, but it was only like to cry. Like I didn't like, I
yeah.
wouldn't like, we kept things for years. And then it was like, okay, I need to strip it down and make it into something that I love. And so I had to do a lot of like intentional, okay, if we're not gonna have kids, I need to make my life good in a way that I love. And it didn't have to be this like groundbreaking new purpose. Oh, are you gonna be on like a cancer board or something to help here? And it's no, I'm still gonna just be me, which is
Yeah.
super valid.
Yeah.
I just don't have children, and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to have that lifestyle. But it was a huge identity shift for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I think that's a new interesting concept that I've been exploring because my in-laws retired a couple years ago and they were going through a bit of an identity crisis
Yes.
with that too. And it's just so interesting when you think your life or something you've been doing for so long and that's the way it's supposed to be. Also, we have society playing a role into that
Oh,
too.
yes. Yeah.
And so that's another theme I'm exploring right now is the motherhood being synonymous with womanhood. And I am less of a woman because I do not have kids.
Very much. Oh my gosh, that like shoots like a feeling right down to my gut of
Mhm.
yes. And I come up against this a lot, I feel like, because so most of my favorite people are mothers. Like a lot of my
Yeah,
friends are mothers,
same.
and it is this like very valuable role in society, but it's also not the only role.
Yeah,
And I have dabbled in where do I fit in with that? And it's very scary because again, not a lot of people that I know have done this. And the
hmm,
people that I do know have done it never really talked about it. So it was
yeah,
like, okay, I felt alone in this, but I don't know, I've definitely surrounded myself with a lot more of like reading and podcasts and books of, okay, what is out there besides this? And a lot of
Yeah.
it I don't identify with, I'll be honest. Like a lot of it is a lot of angry women, which
Mm,
I think is very valuable. I think a lot of change happens when a woman gets angry. That is not necessarily the emotion that I'm leading with at the moment. I'm not saying I won't ever again, but I'm trying to find softer spaces because like fertility felt so difficult and like a wall I could not break through. And I was fighting it for so long that I'm excited to feel soft. And
yeah.
it's, I don't know, I don't see a lot of that. And so I'm trying to navigate that because sure there are things that make me mad, but also coming back to that meditation thing, like I get activated a lot when I feel that again. Cause oh, I was in that like state of life for so long to where I couldn't even listen to music without being like triggered because I was just always anxious and always
Mhm.
trying to control everything around me. So I think that that has been a new shift for me of stepping out of this like really hard, we do this like this
Yeah.
mode, being like, okay, I want to just be and not
Well,
necessarily push.
and we all used to be that way. There was a
Oh,
time period in my 20s where I was not trying to have kids. I was
mm-hmm,
living my life. I
mm-hmm.
was just carefree, everything to a point. But I do miss the times I frequently am thinking I miss that feeling of
Yes.
not caring. And, but I also did have in my head that in the future, that was something that was going to happen. So that's a different shift in
It
that
is a different
too.
shift because you're like, I already know that's not now, that's later.
That'll come later at some point. And then, yeah, it didn't. Can I ask you how old you are?
I'm 41.
Okay. Okay. And it's been, so you quit trying, you said 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
So I'm like trying to do the math.
how you were like on the, so I'm 36. You're right about the same
Yeah.
time frame as that. And do you know how many people tell me I'm still young? Oh, you're still so young. I'm like, okay, yes, but for almost 10 years, I have not been able to make this happen.
And try to say that to a doctor. They don't say that.
No. They're like, oh, all these problems.
Yeah. Oh, and there would be a geriatric pregnancy. That's the word they use. And it's, oh, I'm okay. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I've had to fight for a lot of like doctor things. And I get a lot of, you're so young. That's okay. But like, clearly this is still happening. So what
Yeah.
is another way we can look at this?
Yeah. I don't feel like it's going to get better. I feel like
Right.
I'm just going to get older and it's going to get harder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Things don't, that this situation specifically does not get better as you get older.
Right.
So,
Biologically, my body is not, let's do this much more than we used to be. And that also became like, it wasn't even like a choice for us at some point of, okay, unless we go outside of our bodies, which we tried with the surrogate, even though we were using our embryos, but it was like, I just felt like we were pushing so hard against, I don't know if it was like supposed to happen this way or not, but it just felt like we were fighting so hard and I was so tired of fighting.
yeah, that's where I'm at.
And I'm a good fighter. Like I
Yeah.
fight. And
It's interesting. One of my favorite little tidbits to tell people is like my very first round of IVF, we got two embryos that we sent to genetic testing. And while we were waiting for them to come back with the results of that, it was New Year's that year. I very vividly remember this conversation with my husband. We were out drinking on New Year's, and he was like, what happens if neither of them come back viable? And my instant response, I did not even think about it, was, well, we just do this again until it
uh-huh.
works.
Oh, yes, 1,000%.
We just
Yeah.
keep doing it. And then now I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do it.
Like, because you're like, it'll work. We'll keep doing it. And when something like this specifically, at least for me, doesn't work over and over, I got so exhausted of just not, it's like you're doing all the work and the end result isn't happening. And
Yeah.
it was like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
My husband called it hope fatigue. He was like, there's
Oh, I love that.
so
Yeah.
tired of hoping because like you're living, like I was never like living in the present. I was very much like in the future of like
Yeah.
when I'm pregnant, when I'm a mother, when this happens. And
And then, like, with you guys traveling too, you probably can resonate with this too. Like, we would be planning trips in the future, and not just the, oh, I'm going to be pregnant at that point, so we can't do that or we can't do this. It was for me, I was like, oh, but I wanted to do an egg retrieval that month,
Yeah.
or I wanted to do a transfer that month. And that consumes that whole month because you
Yes.
have doctor's appointments
Yep.
all the time.
Mhm.
And so then it was becoming like it was controlling my life in that aspect too. Like, well,
Very much
I can't do
so.
that month because that's when I wanted to do this.
Yeah. And like I have mentioned before, like we missed out on like family things, on trips, on
Um,
weddings of just, oh, we're not going to be available during that time. We can't like book a flight that far in advance. And it was like, oh gosh. But also I don't know, I'm glad that we tried so hard because I feel like when people are
yeah.
like, did you try? It's, oh, I tried. I don't even need to like, I feel like there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to prove how much you've wanted this in this community, which is
Yeah.
hard.
That's what
Because
I'm saying. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, if I don't pursue the adoption route, which is the only other route I'm really considering, we're not preventing,
right.
but whatever. That would be the only other route that I would. But if I don't go that route, then I feel like everybody's, oh, well,
Guess
she
you
didn't
didn't
want it
want
bad
it.
enough.
Which is clearly you've never been in this situation because I don't know. I feel like this is one thing infertility has taught me is that we're all dealing with our own stuff and just
Yes.
people aren't really saying it. And if you've never been in that position, like you just don't know. Like a lot of people ask me like, when did you know it was time to stop trying? And I think it's different for everybody.
Yes.
And I don't think you necessarily know until you really know, at least for me, because I'm a very decisive person. And like the second we were at the appointment with our surrogate, we were about to graduate. She was 8 weeks pregnant. And
Mm.
they're like, oh, there's no heartbeat. And it
Oh,
just stopped. Like it's
gosh.
measuring exactly where it's supposed to be. And we're all crying. And I was not. At that time, I was not crying because I was so numb of like,
Oh,
I'm so
wow.
tired of this. And I immediately knew I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it. And my husband was like, whoa, like this almost feels crazy. And I was like, I just felt it of I cannot keep doing the same thing over and
Hmm.
over. And I didn't expect that. I didn't know it until I was like faced with it
Yeah.
and it was presented in front of me. I still like even today, like with other things in my life, I feel like I've learned that of like, I don't really know how I'm gonna feel when that happens. So who knows what that's gonna be like because my emotions have surprised me so much in so many of these ways of like, I didn't expect that to happen. And I didn't expect to feel grateful. Like when we were in the hospital and we were told that Clementine's heartbeat had stopped, like I said to my husband, we're going to feel grateful about this. And he was
Oh,
so
wow.
mad at me. He was like, I don't want to talk about that right now. I'm
Oh,
so upset. And then we were just talking about this the other day, and I was like, both of those feelings are valid. Like both of us were coming from such different spaces that were really authentic and real. And it just, I didn't expect that. Neither of us expected to feel that way.
yeah. Oh, there are some silver linings that have come out of that. Like
Oh, very much so.
I've learned to have more compassion and things
Mhm.
like that. And I do recognize the things that I have learned about myself through this process. And like you said, other people, like one thing that I always go back to in my head is I had a friend who lost a pet a long time ago. And prior to my fertility story, I did not know how to respond.
Sure.
I was like, she is devastated, and I just want to make it better, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm
Right.
sure I said all the wrong things now looking back, but now I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. If you need anything, please let me know.
Mhm.
I'm
And I
here
think
for
that like
you.
we have to like almost go through that to like, oh, I did say the wrong thing, which is not
Hmm.
fun. Like I've had to like really explore that the mistakes and the uneasiness of trying to express my feelings to know that okay, that didn't feel right or that wasn't received well. And I also think like one of the because a lot of people will ask me, my friend did have a stillbirth or my friend's dad died. What can
Hmm.
I say? And I think starting out by saying, I don't know what to say really sets the stage of we're all trying to do our best here. And I
Yeah.
don't want to ruin it, but also I want to show up and be here for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like you lost friends through this process?
Oh, yes. I had a best friend that she was the maid of honor in my wedding, and we are no longer friends. And she got pregnant easily, and I couldn't. And jealousy was wild. And to be fair, like looking back, I think neither of us knew what to do.
Sure.
But I had other friends that they got pregnant and we still are friends. But I think this friendship in particular, are the group of friends that we surrounded ourselves with really expected me to show up for her.
Mm,
I couldn't. Like they were like, you have to, she's pregnant. And I was like, fuck that. Like
yeah.
and I didn't even have the words to say that. I was still like, okay, I'll do it. And then I would come
Mhm.
home and cry for 3 days and not
Oh,
bounce back. But it was like, but everyone else says I have to. And I'm very much like in the, I want to still be part of this group. And towards the end of our friendship, it felt like a very toxic of she didn't really want to be near me. And I just wanted to still be in the group. And so I was like desperately grasping and it was just so messy. And I even had people be like, how could you be jealous? And I'm like, are you kidding? This is the
oh
life that
my
I've been
goodness.
trying for. And I want to be happy for her, but I'm not, honestly. Like, I'm
Hmm.
so mad that she's getting the life that I want.
Yeah.
Like, I remember someone also saying jealousy is a sin. And I was like,
Oh, thank you.
cool. So now I'm sinning, like, just by
But
having
also you're human.
exactly. Yeah. And then I had to like almost give it a new narrative. No, jealousy is an emotion. It has a name. It's not made up. People feel it. What I'm feeling is a supernatural response to what's happening right now. And I
Yes.
had to like go back and give myself grace because early 30s Carrie did not have that grace for myself
Mm,
or people around me. And I just wanted to like, I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm happy. And that was one of the hardest parts of my whole infertility journey was like losing that friendship. It was the hardest breakup I've ever had in my life.
mm.
We're still not friends. And like it's okay. I just have had to like really talk my way through it and remember that not everybody's friends for their whole life and is
Yeah.
friendships work always. There's a few, but I think it was a lot of like how people were perceiving me of you have to come to the baby shower and you have to be here. And I was like, and I did, and it felt terrible.
Oh, you did. You're a
Yeah.
better person than me. I
It
would
was that
say
was the
that.
last one. Those were the last few. I was like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore.
I have not been to a baby shower. To be fair, people quit inviting me,
Yes. And I
which,
do want to say I still want to be invited, just know I don't want to, I might not come. Like I want
but
that.
I always want to send a gift.
Yes, same. Now I send flowers. I can't make it, but and this was like oh, this was like early on in my infertility. I want to be clear of I still thought like everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something I don't know. I always wanted to make my own choices in those
Yes,
situations. Like, I understand you're not going to hurt my feelings by inviting me to your baby
right,
shower,
right.
but don't get your feelings hurt when I don't want to
Yes,
come.
yes. Like let
But please,
me choose.
yes, yes. And I feel the same way about, I've had a lot of people talk about pregnancy announcements too. Like, I'll have people be like, why did they tell you that? I'm like, I'm going to find out eventually,
Yes.
for
And also it's
one.
weird when you keep it from me. Like
Yes, and that's even worse than when you, but tell me, maybe don't call me to tell me
right.
or FaceTime me to tell
Or share
me.
it in a group or something.
Shoot
Like
me a quick text
yes,
and then
yes,
let me have my good cry.
yep,
And then I can send you my congratulations, my
yes,
genuine congratulations text.
yes. And don't say you're next because I'm always like when that a lot, I'm pregnant, but you're next. And I'm like, can
Oh,
we
I got that, but early on,
yeah,
way early
same, same,
on.
same, same.
So, like, I had some people that were like, yeah, you're next or whatever. And we had at that point been trying, but only naturally and had not. And I would be like, it's a work in progress, you know?
Right. Trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's always it doesn't like for me now, it doesn't hurt as much. I'm in a different, we're not trying. And but
yeah,
for even for a few years after, like I'd say the first 2 years after we stopped trying, I still was like, oh gosh, okay. I
here
will
we
say
go
now,
again.
like most of my friends are like their kids are older now.
Okay.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of my friends are more getting divorces than
Oh, no.
like new, I don't say new thing, but that's the ones, oh, okay, okay, we're gonna figure this out. But pregnancy announcements were really rough, especially because I dreamt of like how I would do mine
Yep.
and
Yep.
like how I would share that. And I remember we went to Italy to relax. I thought we were going to find out we were pregnant there. And
Mm,
I was like, we're going to have an Italian themed like baby shower announcement. And then I found out there I was not pregnant. And it like was like, is this going to ruin our trip vibe? And just, I don't know, you have all these like hopes and ideas, and then they just monthly let you down. And it's not, oh, maybe in a few years I'll feel different because in a few, at least what that's what I thought. But then in a few years I was still doing the same thing. And it was like, oh, this is really exhausting. And I'm watching everyone around me have babies easily. And I know that motherhood is hard, but I couldn't
100%.
even
Yeah.
get there. I couldn't even get to the
Mhm.
quote unquote hard part. Like
Yeah.
I was living this hard life, but it wasn't being acknowledged or really like embraced or celebrated. That was really hard for me, is that all these people around me got these like celebrations
Yep.
and people just felt sorry for me. And I
Yeah.
don't like pity.
Yeah. We just had a girl at my salon that had a baby just the other day, and her pregnancy journey has been quite the challenge for me because unfortunately her timing of all this stuff had landed right when I was having failed transfers and stuff. But she's a lovely human being. I have nothing against her, but what the owner of my salon wanted to throw her a little baby shower in the salon, and she was trying to be sensitive towards me, but she didn't go like full out. It wasn't like balloons everywhere and decorations everywhere. It was just like if you want to bring a gift and I'll provide lunch. And I walked in that day thinking, okay, I knew this was happening. I can handle this. And I walked in and I was like, there's gifts with pink "It's a Girl" stuff all over it and congrats. And then everybody's, it's your baby shower day. And I was just like, turns out I can't handle this. Can't wait to
Oops.
go home.
Yep. Yes, when I was teaching, that was like a thing. I worked with a lot of young teachers and I shared
Mm-hmm.
a room with the staff room. And so like when there was a party, I could hear it and I learned to not, I couldn't go anymore. And which
Yeah.
was like such a bummer, but also like so real. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and it's really, and to this day, I'll be honest, like it's still hard seeing kids that would be my kids' age because I
Mm-hmm.
never not
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so like those big milestones are rough. Like I have many friends that were pregnant around the same time I was. And it's, oh, your kid's starting kindergarten. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's how old Clementine would be. And so I don't know, it's still there. And I really try to give myself a lot of space for my grief because when I clearly didn't, I turned to drugs and alcohol, and that was like a not fun version of myself.
Yeah.
So I am very aware of it. Also, it's my job. Like I interview people about grief, but I don't know. It's when it's yours, it's personal and it's like a sacred thing, but it's also like something that most people don't want to talk about. Like when people asks, oh, what do you do? I'm a writer. And then if they say what kind of writer, I'm like, okay, here we go. I don't always lead with it, but so
Yeah.
ask. This is my job and I love it.
Can we talk about one thing that I noticed and I don't want to take away from this type of grief, but when someone dies
Mhm.
and you're grieving that person, it's pretty final, right?
Very, yes.
So the unique thing about infertility
Mhm.
is it's over and over, and you have to start over, reliving that grief every single failure.
Yes.
With your experience with grief and writing about it and interviewing people, I don't know. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So I love this.
Okay.
So I worked with this woman named Cole Imperi, and she is a thanatologist, which is she studies death, dying, and bereavement. And she also relates it a lot to flowers and like rituals with flowers. She's Cole Imperi on Instagram. She's a really great person to follow.
Okay.
And she came up with the term called shadow loss, where
Okay.
it's you're grieving, but there's not necessarily like a body in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be infertility, divorce, a friendship
Yeah.
breakup. And once it really impacted me on my journey because I felt once I learned like a term for it, I was like, oh, okay, this is grief. I'm letting go of something that I wanted, but we're not having a funeral. So we're not like
Right.
celebrating it in this way and
Don't
learning
really get
how
any closure.
yeah, there's no closure and everyone around you isn't really honoring it, which is also
Mm-hmm.
weird because you're like, this big thing is happening to me and no one really knows, even though I might tell them, but they're not treating it like grief.
Yeah.
And so she talks a lot about how to work with your own grief rituals and things like that, and how to let go of things and work through it. And which she brings, like I said, a lot of flowers in with it, which was I love flowers. So that was like a big part for me. And so like finding ways to identify it. And then like we would have a little, like I used to love to burn a lot of things. And so we
I love
also felt
that.
it felt very final too. Like,
Yeah.
and so we would like when we would have a miscarriage or even when we like decided to stop having children, like we would either write something or find something safe to burn, obviously, but like
Yeah.
we would burn it and have my husband and I would have a little like ritual in our backyard or something. To be fair, I often made him do this because I was like, this is not his go-to, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I need help. I need you to be a part of this.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like learning a way to have my own ritual with it, which also felt weird because I feel like these like grief rituals are so like traditional and old, but with something like infertility, it hasn't always been acknowledged throughout
Yeah.
ages. So you have to come up with your own, which feels weird. And I've definitely like explored different things, but like burning something always felt the best for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just interesting because when you have to re-grieve the life that you wanted to have, and I think divorce is a very good example of that
Mhm.
too, like you were saying, because you thought you were going to be with this person for forever and you had this vision of your life with your kids and whatever. And it's the same thing. I experienced I went to a friend's wedding. I was in a wedding in October last year, and I was triggered by watching the mother and groom dance.
Yes.
And I
That a
looked at
lot
my
of times.
husband and I started tearing up, and I was like, and this was before my last and final embryo transfer, which was last November. And I just looked at that and I was like, I don't think that's something I'm ever going to get to do.
Yeah. That
And so it's just little things like that throughout your life, and you see all your friends and everybody. And that wasn't even like a baby situation,
right.
right?
I
Like,
think that that is really important to acknowledge because I never really thought about that until like now that I'm older and seeing this.
mhm.
And I have made friends with some older women that are child free, and they're like, and then people will ask you if you have grandchildren. Like it almost never stops.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, I've never even considered that.
Yeah.
And they're like, assume you have children. And it's the small talk that everybody asks, but these little things come up that will still get me. I think one of the things right now, like even I think we were watching like Love is Blind or something, like some
Yeah.
dating show, and they were like talking about, oh, I want 3 kids. This is we're gonna live here, and the kids are gonna have that. And I'm always like, like I remember doing that. I remember doing that, and
Yeah.
it sets a fire inside me. Like I get nervous about, oh, I hope it works out, but also no one's discussing if it doesn't work out. Not that everyone wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about a divorce when you're getting married, but it's there. And I see these little pockets in places of, oh, that hurts.
That makes me feel like such a negative person, though, because I've totally been there too. I had one of my sister's Instagram friends reached out to me because she was struggling and having to go through IVF. And my sister was like, oh, you should talk to my sister. And so she reached out to me and we had all these conversations. And I remember being like, she was very positive and God bless her. And it was her first round of IVF, just like I was in the beginning. And I remembered being like, just be prepared.
But also, I don't know. I honestly, even if somebody were to tell me that at that time, I probably wouldn't have, I'd been like, nope, I'm not buying into that.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know, but also I don't know because nobody said it to me. So I don't
Yeah.
know what I would have done. But it, and also like when we were done with those like treatments, like there wasn't much the fertility clinic did for us, which why would they? We're not paying them money anymore. Like they were not a customer.
Was that you or was that the Childless Collective
That was
group
the
that did
Childless
that
Collective. We
post
talked about it.
recently?
Yes. Which I was
Uh,
like, that is a great question. There isn't much aftercare.
no, which
And
in fact, with my last embryo transfer, the MA called me about my blood test to tell me it was negative.
Mhm.
And then she was like, so do you want to go into another cycle?
Yes, they, yeah, that is
And okay, I got to know these girls really well because I was going
sure,
back regularly.
sure,
I
sure,
really
sure.
enjoyed their company when I was
Yes.
there. I really loved the nurses at my clinic. But I was literally like, no. I said, I don't have any embryos left. So no.
Yes. Yes.
And I know
Look
she
at
was
the
just
chart. I don't
asking
know.
for
Can't you see
like,
that I don't have any embryos left?
yeah, are you not looking at my chart? Like me going into another cycle means I have to do another egg retrieval and
Mhm.
start from the beginning. And that is a huge conversation I now have to have with my husband, if
Mhm.
that's even something we want to do. And I still feel a little bit bad, but I'm also annoyed that the MA called me and
Right.
not my nurse or not my doctor
Yeah.
because,
Well,
yeah.
it needs to be like, at least for me, like I needed a little softness to it because like my
Mhm.
life is in such a different space than I was probably a week ago, thinking maybe I was pregnant and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
happening. And it's such like a drastic change that I don't know.
I
It's
know.
it's a lot. And there's not a lot of, if you're not going to pay for us anymore, okay. And while I understand that, being on the other side of that, it's heartbreaking. Oh wow, I
Honestly,
don't matter
and I
now.
realize they have a lot of patients they have to keep track
Yes,
of.
of
But
course.
in all honesty, a simple phone call from like the doctor or the nurse to just say, I'm so sorry that this happened.
Yes.
If you need anything else, we're here for you. Like,
Yes.
I think
I
that
will
would
say,
go a long way.
agreed. I will say our doctor called us when Clementine died. I don't even know
Okay.
how they knew now that I say that out
Oh,
loud.
interesting.
Because we had graduated from the clinic, but they called to be like, okay, I'm so sorry this happened. Also, if you would like to take the next steps, I can transfer you to somebody. And it was
Mm.
like, oh no, we're not doing this again. So it was like, it was there, but it was also like, I don't know, maybe some people did want to do it again, but I was like, I'm not supposed to be pregnant again. So this is not me. And they're like, oh, we work with surrogates as well. And I was like,
Mm.
okay,
But
well,
you're
like,
like, at that point in time, you are not in the headspace to be
no,
making.
no,
Yeah.
no.
I didn't go through a stillborn, but like every time after an embryo transfer, I didn't exactly sit there and go, all right, let's do this again
Yes.
immediately. I did have back-to-back cycles, but
Yeah,
I,
same.
wasn't like that day I decided.
Yes. And also like to put that on someone is a lot when they're in those
Mhm.
heavy emotions. But I don't know, it's such a weird like journey that I never expected to be on and never thought that I was going to be faced with these questions.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was thinking about our vows the other day and about how I was like, it's so funny. Like we said our vows and like my husband and I are still very happy, but also it's like a lofty thing in the moment of like, I talked about how I still want to stay with you when life sucks. And I was like, oh, this is what we were talking about. And
Yeah.
you just don't know. Like you're so dreamy in that state.
Mhm. Yeah. It's tough. I do want to touch on one other subject before we
Yes.
wrap up, but how have you found now, the stage you're at now? Have you made more friends that don't have kids? How did you find support? Because I'm finding it very difficult
Yes. Yeah.
to, because everyone I know either had kids easily,
Hmm.
or even if they did fertility treatments, went on to have kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
In my immediate circle of friends, there is no one that is in my shoes. And I
Yeah.
realize everybody's journey is different, but like no
No,
one
but
who
I
went through
think that's
fertility
really cool.
treatments and didn't succeed.
Yes. I think that's very common. Most of my friends didn't do fertility treatments and have children.
Yeah.
I found a lot of support online. That's where I found it, like Childless Collective, Gateway Women. Like I had to reach out to be like, I don't know, I also live in a smaller area, but even still, it was a lot of, oh, like you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Mm,
And not being able to connect on that was really hard. I think time has helped. I also have recently, I'd say over the past like 5 years or so, I've really tried to find new friends that like
yeah.
which is super hard as an adult. But I have put myself out there in a way of, because I've even had friends be like, okay, you don't have kids. Like, I want people with no kids in my life. And it's yes, but that also feels weird.
Yeah.
And I just want to be friends.
I will say a lot of people that don't have kids are able to do a lot more.
Yes. Oh, very much. I can go out on a Tuesday night and it's not like an issue for me.
And that's a different friendship than when you have friends with
Yes.
kids. And yeah.
Yes. I also will say I have distanced myself from a lot of people that have babies because babies are still really hard for me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like being a teacher, like if a kid's in school, we can get along. I can talk to you for hours. Like that's my audience in a lot of ways. But if a kid's too small for that, I have a hard time. Like I really, and I've noticed that still and am okay with it. Maybe I'll get over it, maybe I won't. Still in therapy, so who knows?
Yeah.
But I think I've had to be really more aware of who I'm surrounding myself with. Do they see me for who I am? And do I see them for who they are, even outside of parenthood and
Yeah.
outside of being like a bereaved mother? Because I've also met some people that like really latch onto that and like only want to talk
Oh,
about Clementine, which I'm like, I get it. I thank you for acknowledging her existence, but I don't spend all day, every day talking about her. So it's
yeah.
just finding that balance.
And
So
those friends too, that God bless them, are very into their children and mothering,
yes,
and that is their entire lives, and they don't do or talk about anything else. That's really hard for me too, because I'm like,
same.
and not because of I'm jealous or I'm angry or whatever. It's because I have nothing to relate with you on
Exactly.
in that
Yes.
regard.
Exactly. And it happened recently the other day. I saw a friend that I haven't seen in a while, and she was just chatting only about her kids. And I was like, okay, like I can't really engage. And I think she felt it because I was like giving her like I chatted for a bit, but then it was like, okay, like I'm out. Like,
Yeah.
and I think she felt bad, which is okay. I feel bad too
Yeah.
sometimes, but like allowing that awkwardness. But also for me, again, like her kid's really young and they're hitting a lot of milestones. Like I get it, but
Yeah.
also I can't really feed into
Yeah.
that. Even on the flip side of that, there's like I have a birth story and most people don't want to hear it. And it's
Um,
actually, I have really fond memories of it. And
mm,
it's this thing that if I ever bring it up, it is you can see the faces change. It's okay, not the crowd. I get
oh,
it.
wow.
But
Yeah.
it's like there's this part of me that like I can connect, like when you talk about getting an epidural or going into the delivering room, like I did those things too. It just didn't turn out the same way. And
Mm,
it's this no one really wants to hear the bummer story. And
yeah.
it's fine. Like some people do, but also I'm like, I'm not here to just tell my sad stories. So there's
Yeah.
like that balance that we have to, I don't know, agree with. But finding friendships has been really difficult.
Yeah.
And online has been best,
Hmm.
but I also have like recently found a space of, oh, my friends have like kind of older kids, and I've been able to bond with that because
Yeah.
they're not breastfeeding, they're not pushing their kids in strollers everywhere. And so like they also have a little bit of free time to be able to not be in the straight motherhood role the whole time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that definitely makes sense because when they're younger, they have to be more involved in that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it has been an interesting because I just always thought I'd have success at some point and then I'd be part of the club. And so,
Oh, the club. That is, yes, the
yeah.
club.
And then I don't know if people look at it the same way or them I'm putting this in my head as like by not pursuing it anymore, not just the you don't want it bad enough, but it's okay. She chose not to keep
Yes.
going with that
Yeah.
too. And I don't know, there's just all these so many emotions I'm trying to work through. And it's just been really hard to find the support and stuff for it. So
I agree, especially like this time of our lives. Like this, that's what women are doing.
yes. And now I have a bunch of younger cousins that are getting ready to start that chapter because they're all getting married this year and things like
Yep.
that. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
Here we go. And I don't know, at least for me, still like things still come up and it's okay. I have to like learn how to navigate that in a way that feels good. And it changes over time. Like
Yeah.
I didn't feel the same way that I did 10 years ago, which that everyone has that feeling. But this is also something that like we're society really celebrates and we're supposed to like all gather around and shower these people with love. And it's, oh, this is hard. This is hard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this has been a lovely conversation.
So lovely.
And I feel like I could just talk to you for ages. I'm
Same.
sure. I really hope after this we can keep in touch because
Agreed. Yes, please. Yes, please.
yes, because it's just so nice to talk to somebody that, gets it. And then also hopefully this just raises awareness for the situation. And then because I do, is the negative side of it is that not everybody goes through fertility treatments and comes out with a happy ending and
They
shining
don't talk
some
about
light
that.
on that. And then hopefully if there's somebody listening that's in our shoes or going through a similar story, they don't feel so alone.
That's
So
my main goal, I feel like, with everything I do, because I felt really alone for a really long time
yeah,
and it sucked.
yeah, for sure. Do you have any last final parting words, whether it's about fertility, grief, anything before we go?
I like to think that, and I think we all have a take on it, as we all have a sad story, but that doesn't mean we have to have a sad life. And
Mm,
while if something terrible happened to you, you don't have to turn it into this positive thing. I just hope you love that part of yourself because it's part of your story.
mm. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. This has been so great. I feel maybe we could do another episode or
Yes,
two.
oh, I would love that.
I don't know. We could just keep the conversation going. I don't even know what we talk about. Keep going. But I don't know. Maybe since you have so much perspective on grief and stuff like that too, we could do a more of a grief episode or something like that. But yeah,
I
let's
would
do it
be
again.
honored. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And everyone out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.